following is a conversation with Neil O'Sullivan, Aussie-based entrepreneur, mental health advocate and co-founder of Nimbus Co, Australia's first exclusive infrared sauna and wellness space that focuses on preventative health and self-care. In this episode, we discuss men's mental health, breaking the stigma around vulnerability, and his own journey through anxiety, substance abuse, and family struggles. We also dive into breathwork, cold therapy, and finding balance in everyday life. Not wanting to break with tradition, expect a few awkward stories, and definitely some laughs along the way. We hope you enjoy listening as much as we did chatting with Neil.
Good evening, Neil O'Sullivan. Welcome to the Brink.
Hello. Good morning from Australia. Beautiful Bondi Beach. It's sunny outside. It's about 8 a.m. here, Eastern Seaboard time. So yeah, life is good.
Yeah, it's like, it's flipping cold here.
Yeah, from the south of France. Well, you guys are going towards winter time, whereas our summer is just about to kick off. So the weather is starting to pick up. It's really, turning into some nice mornings for swims. Yesterday I was down at the beach at 6 a.m. doing a men's group and swims. So yeah, it's a good place of the world to be right now.
We were only talking about swim circles and stuff last week, weren't we? At Bondi.
Yeah, we've been talking about men's groups. So.
I'm like, if you're in the group, you're all a kind of a salesperson for the group, if that makes sense. It's not a pyramid scheme, but it's a group called W Now, and it was set up by two Irish blokes. And one of them was Ty Kennelly, who was a former AFL player. He played for Sydney Swans, and he's quite famous over here, and he's retired. And then when COVID hit, he kind of went into a bit of depression and lost his job and things like that. And he decided to do this Wednesday morning gathering of men down in Maroubra Beach, which is a few beaches down south from Bondi. And it just snowballed from there. And now there's groups all around the world. I saw this morning, there's a New York group. I think there's groups back in Ireland and I think in the UK, everything. And basically the premise is you meet every Wednesday, 6 a.m. You do a bit of a workout. Like it's not too intense, but it's, gets you going. If you're near water, you do swims. So we were going 5 burpees into the ocean, back out. You do that 5 times. Then you do a circle of trust where the floor is open. Anyone can talk about anything, whether it's your partner, work, life, anything. And then we finish with a coffee. And then we do 60 press-ups for all the men that we lose. I think it's every hour across the world. That's the statistic. So
is that what it is? What to what? To suicide?
To suicide, yeah. So it's 60 men, I think it's per hour across the world we lose to suicide. Yeah, in Australia it's 8 per day. So we have about, I think the last time I checked was about 3,500 Australians take their life every day. So that's 8 a day. So the numbers are just harrowing,
3,500 Australian men take their life every year.
Yes. Yeah. Wow. Yeah. And I have worked, luckily, with this amazing mental health charity called Batyr, Batyr, who help with kind of more the youth. And they talk about 30 people in a classroom. And out of 30 people in a classroom, at least 5 will suffer with some form of mental health. 3 of those will not talk about it, though. Only 2 of that 5 will actually share their thoughts about it. So it's the 3 out of 5 that is the worst statistic, because it's the people who are suffering in silence. So there's another statistic more widely, I think I've heard that 1 in 4 will struggle with some kind of mental health in their lifetime. So it's, most people are going to be affected by it, and even if you're not affected by it, that statistic goes up to, nearly 100% in terms of your inner circle. So whether it's a friend or a family person, most of us are going to have at least one person in our life who's affected by it. So if you don't talk about it, how on earth are you going to fix it?
Yeah. Can I ask you a question? Like, I don't know if you'll know the answer to this, but why do you think men find it difficult to talk about their innermost problems or their mental?
Here we go. Well, I've got a few ways of answering this. Number one, whilst men statistically take their own life more than women, Batyr again told us that more women attempt suicide. So there's actually more attempts of suicide. And when I think of this, and this is not any kind of science opinion, this is just my own personal opinion. But my opinion as to why that is I think women are deeper thinkers than, let's say, men. So I feel like I don't think there's any difference, to be honest. I think men and women go through the same, not the same, but we have our struggles with life that are equal in the sense of like we bear stresses as a man, women bear stresses as a woman, right? But I think when it comes to taking that ultimate decision, I think women go 90% of the way, but everyone knows whether it's your mom or your sister and stuff like that, they're just that tiny bit of more empathetic and emotional generally, right? So I think at some point they either, whether it's a failed attempt or, they do it on purpose, I think that at some point something goes, I shouldn't do this, and they pull back. Whereas men are a bit more like, fuck it, I don't care, I'll do it. It's that bravado, it's that ego. And that plays a role even in taking your own life, in my opinion. That's just my personal opinion. I think that we both are thereabouts at the same place. But for some reason, women have this ability to maybe pull back or do something that's maybe not going to, guys I think are more likely to put their hand up generally in life. And I think that plays out in this as well. In terms of why men, I think it depends culturally. I think, I live in Australia, but I'm Irish. It's a big issue in Australia, as we just mentioned. It's a big issue in Ireland. I think the OECD had a statistic where Ireland was number 3, I think, in Europe in terms of people taking their own life. But if you look at the reasons behind that, I think they do vary differently. I think, if you think of Ireland, we have things like the British occupation for 800 years. You had famine. You had an impoverished nation for a long, long time. Not much hope, poor weather, darkness, cold, all those factors. Australia, not so much, right? Australia is kind of more the opposite. Outdoor living, sunshine, things like that. But I think in Australia, it's probably our isolation. We have the tall poppy syndrome here. Australians are famous for their bravado and ego and the winning mentality, which is great. And all you have to do is look at the Olympics and things like that, where Australia does well in almost all sports. But that has to take a toll on it as well if you're a man, and that masculinity of I have to win. And if I cannot win, well, then I'm not good enough. So I think every country has its things, but somehow we kind of still come to the same conclusion, unfortunately, that it's an issue for everybody, no matter where you are.
Okay, yeah. But so still, like, I mean, that was a great answer. But I want to get to why do men find it so hard to open up and talk? Why do you think?
I think it's I think it's bravado, ego, masculine, like the whole, like it was seen as weakness. And this is even in my generation, like when I was growing up and I just turned 40 2 weeks ago, like you'd never tell anyone that there was something wrong with you, because of weakness. You would be perceived as like, oh, he's not a bloke, or because I'm quite soft. I've always been a bit soft. People would call me gay, I used to get people just brash you with like a tag for no reason. Because why? You're emotional. And like my mum was very loving, and she gave us a lot of feminine energy as well as masculine energy. And I can be tough when I need to be tough, but I can also be soft when I need to be soft. But that was always seen as a sign as a weakness when I was growing up. And even with my own mental health, like I've shared publicly a lot about my story, and I come from a corporate background, and I think that not so much fast forward to today, but in the past that has kind of almost gone against me. Not that anyone has actually physically said that, but I feel like sometimes I feel like I've been painted with a brush that if there's a promotion up for grabs, oh, well, he's got a mental health thing, so we're not going to give it to this bloke.
Interesting. That's a good point. Hey, yeah. So you would hide that sort of stuff because, it is seen in society as a weakness, like, right? It kind of is. And it so shouldn't be, because mental health is becoming way more prevalent now than it ever has been, right? Just because of the pace the world's going, men sort of don't really know where they fit anymore. Do you know what I mean? Like,
I mean, that's the hard part. Like, not to say that this is right, but like back in the old days, our roles were a lot clearer. Men were bread earners, right? We were the ones on the farm, fighting battles, fighting animals, all those kind of things to protect the family. We had this protection protocol almost ingrained into us that either that was innate or socially constructed over thousands and thousands of years. Now, in the last 10 years, it's not even 10 years really, we've started to unravel that a little bit. The playing fields are a lot more level. And now it's a case where the man is not necessarily the bread earner. So there's a lot more families now where it's either equal or the mum is the bread earner. And there's nothing wrong with that. Absolutely not. It's great. But then the problem I think a lot of men are finding now is like, well, where do they stand and what role can I have outside of the breadwinner? And that
Yeah.
could be stay at home dad, nurturer, but this provider label, which was very black and white for literally tens of thousands of years, has all been unraveled in the last, well, it's taken a while to get to this place, obviously, but now I think some men are a bit lost. They don't know what to do. And there's a huge education piece, in my opinion, around going, it's okay to not be the provider. There's a role for all of us, and to just help men be more comfortable in those other roles. Like I had a guy who worked for me in my old corporate job who unbelievably talented, worked in advertising, great guy, super professional, has a great career ahead of him. He said to me one day in a one-on-one, he said, I just want to be a stay-at-home dad. And I was like,
Yeah.
oh. And initially I was like, oh shit, how do I navigate that? I'm trying to keep you here, you're a top performer and stuff like that. But he had a goal that he just wanted to be a stay-at-home dad. And it took me years to actually appreciate the strength and value in that decision that he wanted to make. And I was like, well, why can't he do that? Why does he have to go to work 9 to 5 every day to do something that he doesn't want to do,
That's the same with you could put the shoe on the other foot. I reckon there's a lot of women or a lot of girls, or a lot of women that probably have are thinking the same sort of thing as men, because they're being railroaded into having careers. Women have got to be like, career minded, be breadwinners. When I think a lot of them, I may be wrong, but I think a lot of them be pretty happy to just, get married, raise their children, be at home for their kids, provide for their husbands in terms of, nurture them when they get home. Do you know what I mean? But that's
Yeah,
almost
yeah.
looked at as as a woman now. You're just, you're a bit of a simpleton or whatever. Do you know, like you don't have any drive or whatever. But it's sort of the shoe jumps onto the other foot. So even their roles are being redefined, I guess.
Oh yeah, like if you have especially a woman who already had a career, and then if you hear of that woman, there's definitely a stigma around that woman choosing to be a mum. There's definitely a stigma now going, oh well, she doesn't have that drive, she doesn't want to be successful in life, that kind of thing. But how is
But
that
what
more
divide?
valuable, than raising your own kids? Like, it's like it just doesn't make any sense. And yeah, oh yeah, like we're all, and then also I say the other environmental factor is that some families don't have a choice right now because, back to my parents' generation, you could live off a solo pay packet, like your dad would work, that was enough to even buy a house. Whereas nowadays, you could be a part, like let's say I was living in Bondi Beach for 10 years, like you have to have both of you working in high flying 6-figure roles to be even able to afford an apartment in Bondi. So you don't have a choice. Like
Yeah.
you can do it for mat leave where one of you or two you share it. But after that, you got to get back on the horse because we got to pay the mortgage, like a lot of people don't have that choice anymore.
Yeah, and so what happens is, and this is what I see in society now, is that mum and dad have to go to work, even just to have a normal average life or $1 million house. If they're on 70,000-80,000 each, that's 160 grand. By the time they've got their two kids, they pay tax, they're down to 120, sending their kids to school, food, clothes, all that stuff. They're down to sort of like 90, have a little holiday and all that sort of stuff. And it's taking you 20 years to pay your house off, right? And you're
Yeah.
mad stack. You're on the Ferris wheel. It's not the Ferris wheel. What is it? The mouse
Hamster
wheel.
wheel. Hamster
Yeah,
wheel. Yeah.
you're just
Hamster
going around
wheel.
like that. And then the kids come home from school. Mum and dad aren't there.
Or they're naked.
Mum and dad aren't there. Mum and dad come home. They get home at 5 or 6 o'clock. Mum or dad's got to cook dinner. They're too tired to interact with their kids, right? So now the kids are on all their gadgets and all that sort of stuff. we're not eating together as a family and all that sort of stuff, because that's just gone. In my day, that's what you did. You know, there were no computers, there were none of this, there was nothing else to look at. There was 3 channels on television, right? But the point being is we're sort of losing the family nucleus, right? Because the family don't get to see each other that much. Because after dinner, you're knackered, you go to bed, and then mum and dad are back on the treadmill again, you know?
Oh yeah, I mean, I come from Ireland. The last few years when I used to go home, like there was no kids. You wouldn't see kids in the park anymore. And like my dad used to say, like even he'd noticed it over the 30 or 40 years they'd lived there. Like when we were kids in the summer and go to Europe as it stays bright till what 10:30 in the night, he'd be pulling us in by our ears, you know, like where is he? Where is he? Whereas nowadays, like it's like a ghost town, and you're going, where are all the kids? They're at home playing. Yeah, inside playing video games, and then that has a knock-on effect to social interaction. Like I don't know, maybe I'm just saying this because I'm older, but I feel like interaction with people generally now are so awkward. I find compared to 20 years ago, I feel like even people you know now, I just feel generally the whole when you go and meet someone or bump into someone, it's just a little bit. It's always a little bit. You could feel that someone's nervous or everyone's a bit twitchy, like. It's not the same as the old days where you just go out and say hello to everybody. I feel like now interactions
Doesn't
generally,
happen.
yeah, they've just gone very stiff. And then you go, do I hug? And then you go to shake someone's hand, they go to hug you, you go to kiss them, and you're like, oh, sorry, and this is not even just with strangers. This is with some of your best mates. Like I feel like, yeah, it's a little bit scary how all this kind of connectivity and connection is going, really. Like, and yeah, it makes me a little bit sad.
And doing the absolute opposite, right? We're connected on devices and we're utterly disconnected in real life.
Yeah. It's so true. Like I was saying this the other day, I was on a podcast and I was just saying we're just so lost the ability to connect, like with our community. You know, you walk down the street and everybody, even if they're not on their gadgets, 9 out of 10 people won't make eye contact with you, even if you're trying to, you know, because you just want to go, hey, raise your eyebrows. G'day, how you going? You know, like, how many people say hello now? Nobody.
No, well, that's my wife pays me out because whenever we go on a walk, I say hello to everybody. I think it's just the Irishness in me. I'm like, morning, and everyone's like, what? Like, you maybe get 1 out of 3 will respond to you. A lot of people just don't even respond to you. You know, they just like it's bizarre. But I'm also shocking at like the Instagram and stuff like that. Like, I'm not going to sit here and say that I'm great. Like, I do things that I, try and do to help me in this. Like my wife is way better at putting the phone down, but the phone is probably the biggest addiction I've got at the moment. It gives me this sense of, it's embarrassing to say, but like validation, and it's terrible. And it's one thing I haven't been able to really shake off of late. So
validation in terms of what, as in like social media and stuff like that, or?
Yeah, social media. So I'll just like, if I have a moment, rather than sitting with my thoughts, which is what we used to do, right? Or, literally sit there doing nothing and because this is I read about this the other day, that we don't spend enough time just computing things like we used to with our brain. So you have a big conversation with someone. Back in the old days, you would go have a walk, you'd sit down, you'd let it muster and you'd let it ponder. Whereas what we do now is the minute that's over and I've got like a window, and I'm talking it could be 30 seconds or it could be 6 minutes. I go straight to the phone just to see what's going on. And I'll get a message and then I'll jump on that and I get a little dopamine hit and then I'll get someone's liked my reel and it just goes. And then all of a sudden it's 35 minutes later and I'm like, what the fuck am I doing? And you have to pull yourself out of that. But then I keep falling back into that trap over and over again. And I just haven't been able to shake it. And it's worse when you have your wife saying something to you about it. Your partner is noticing it. You're like, fuck, this is actually a bit of an issue now,
Yeah, I always used to get scolded for like reading the paper, because you used to get the paper in the old days.
Yeah.
So was it like, right? But I was always on my phone reading the paper. I'd get the New York Times, which is way too left for me, the Telegraph and the Herald, right? And I'd get growled at. But that's the only thing I looked at. And then once we started doing this podcast, and
you had to get yourself an Instagram.
I had to get myself an Instagram, right? I was like, and then you start watching this stuff on Instagram, you're like, oh wow, that's really interesting. You're like, so I can see how addictive it is.
Yeah.
Because and then that algorithm gets a hold of you and it starts pumping you down other stuff, right?
Yeah.
And I never used to, hey,
No.
ever. And now I'm like you. I'm like, and I'll find myself after 10 minutes. I'm like, holy hell, I've just been scrolling through this shit, and I didn't even know what scrolling was like 6 months ago.
Yeah, and there's a bit of an irony to the fact that we're doing a podcast which is centered around connection and, you know, getting people to open up and all that sort of stuff. Yet it's on social media.
Yeah,
where we're asking people to get online and look at their phones.
Well,
you know?
Yeah, I think unfortunately it's gotten to the point where it's gotten to a point where I haven't got to this far, but like you're just gonna have to put in guardrails around all these things. Like we even have to do with our relationship between my wife and I, because if you've got a business, we have two businesses. Like in your mind, you think, oh, of course we can handle it just off the cuff. We're human, you know. But the reality is nowadays, I think for a lot of us, we can't, and like we have to schedule in time to be together, or it's her morning versus my morning, and we've tried for years to try and do that, just, you know,
but at least
on
you're
the
doing
fly,
it.
and it can't be done. And it's the same with social media. I think it's just people have to put in guardrails around it, because you just can't. I've tried to go, no, I'll be fine now. Come on now, mate. Let's just stop it. And then you might do that for like half a day, but then you're back on it again. And so I think there is a place for it in terms of, you know, education and all those kind of things, but it's just the proliferation of it now means that you can't control it. And you're right, Dave. Like I love looking at all kinds of arguments, whether it's left, right, whatever it is, even Trump, you know, like I've actually become kind of more fascinated with him in terms of like his whole story. But like you watch one video on one thing and then you obviously get pushed down this channel of just constant. And if you're, let's say, a little bit less worldly in terms of like not being able to have a macro view on whatever has been fed to you,
or not a critical thinker.
yeah, exactly. You're just like literally swallowing all that down nonstop. And like, cause I've just done it as a kind of an experiment going, I can see why people would vote for this person or that person or be so into this, because once you get into that loop, you can't get out of it. And if you're not aware of what's going on, you just think, well, and like the arguments they make are also extremely convincing. You know, I'm listening to this going, this fucking guy's not wrong. Like, you know, like.
But it can be good too, though. Like I've noticed since we've been doing this, you know, I've been following more and more accounts, and a lot of it's about the stuff we're talking about. So my algorithm's firing me stuff like that all the time, which is, it's really positive. And I mean, like Neil we haven't even mentioned that you've got a podcast yourself.
Yes.
This is mental, right? You know, and your
Yes.
whole thing is about normalizing mental health through laughter and conversation. So, like, jumping online and looking at that sort of stuff, like, how can that be a bad thing, right?
Yeah. Yeah, true. But then it's like, what's the answer? How do you create someone who's aware or able to be aware of what they're actually being fed and making an objective decision? That's the hard part, right? And I think that part is kind of harder to solve, because that comes more about your environment, your parents, what educational system you went up in, etc., etc. But yeah, like the issue with mental health is just the problem I find with mental health is, whilst we're making leaps and bounds in terms of talking about it, and thank you for having me on the show to be able to like talk about this, and there's a lot more opportunities like this than there were 10 years ago to talk about it. But whilst things are going on a positive trajectory, the problem is going back to that environmental factors of connectivity, social media, they're growing faster than the positive stuff is.
Yeah.
So that's the big problem. We're doing quite well, but we're just getting hit with all this other stuff constantly. We're on our phones more. We have to work harder, longer hours, less social time, blah, blah, blah. And so that's going faster than we can keep up with. So I hear lots of people talking about mental health now. I have this men's group that I was telling you guys about that I go to. There's loads of stuff going on, but people are still taking their lives. So I think the solution, and it reminds me of the lockout laws in Sydney. I don't know if you heard about that, where people were being king punched, and then they just brought in lockout laws, which was just not the solution.
Yeah.
In my mind, with that, it's like it's a societal issue. It's this, well, what's going on with the drinking culture? What's going on, whether it's whatever is testosterone that people are taking, or whatever it is, there's deeper issues potentially running here rather than just a surface level thing. And that goes the same in mental health, in my opinion. We need we need something that's systemic. We need something that's built in from schooling, that's done in the right way. And it's not easy, I get it, because you hear stuff on the other end of the spectrum now that if somebody has a bad day in school, they might be 10 years of age, they get
Yeah.
targeted that, oh, you've got depression. So it can swing the other way, where it's like, now we're just going, oh yeah, you've got depression, take this tablet.
Yeah.
So we really have to be careful with that. But I think if we raise our kids in an environment where they are able to share their emotions, if they're feeling down, they can let us know. We don't need to label it, but even just to give them a voice and make them feel comfortable to air, even that alone would do huge strides, in my opinion. And it does happen in some places. Because I have these conversations all the time with other parents who do tell me that their kids are actively telling them that they're feeling upset. So there is some good stuff out there, but we need to kind of bring it more into the mainstream. And it's okay to not be okay. And it took me 36 years of my life probably to realize that I'm not going to cure my own. Like, I have depression, panic attacks, and anxiety, the gruesome threesome, I call them. And they're horrendous, right? But it's not about me curing them. That's not the point. They're just part of me. And you get to the really good, juicy stuff when you actually flip it on its head and go, they're part of me, yes, but they can also be a superpower. And what I mean there is, like, panic attacks are awful, right? One of the worst things you could ever experience. However, a panic attack is telling you that something's not right, mate. You need to have a look at what's going on, whether it's your job, environment, part, whatever. And you have to go inward. It forces you to go inward, and it forces you to bring down walls and address unresolved trauma and stuff like that. And that's not easy. It's some of the hardest shit you can do in life. It really is. And I'm hesitant to encourage people to do, but it's the best thing you can do. From my experience, it's the best thing you can do, because if you don't address it, what happens is things like alcoholism, drug addiction, violence, domestic violence, adultery, all kinds of stuff can come if you hide your unresolved trauma. So it's definitely been a difficult journey for me, but it's one that I wouldn't change it for the world, because it's made me learn so much.
Hey Neil, when did you first? Do you remember when you first had your panic attack, or your first bout of depression, or your first anxiety attack? I guess you'd call it.
Yes. I knew I had depression when I was about 12 or 13. That was the first thing that I remember. I remember just being really dark, like having some suicidal ideation as a kid. My mum struggled with depression. She also is an alcoholic. There was a lot of alcohol on that side of the family. So I was very used to, from a very young age, hearing my mom and, drinking and upset in the kitchen and all this kind of stuff. And so I had a lot of that when I was growing up, and it kind of just was part of my DNA. Like, I feel like it was just always there. I would be high sometimes, and then I'd be low another time. The panic attacks and anxiety only came way later in life. And I put that down to, I was bullied when I was about 8 or 9 in school because of
Yeah.
my nose and my eyes. And I was bullied by the cool kids in school. And I used to go swimming then as well, and they used to bully me at swimming because I wasn't really quick to learn. And then my mum pulled me out of swimming, and I didn't learn to swim for the next 30 years. So it was only when I came to Australia I learned to swim. So, like, that's just an example of, what can happen if those things do occur. My mum did address it with those parents. It did stop, and we kind of moved on. But then what happened off the back of that? And this, now, I'm saying this like it's just coming off my tongue, but it's taken me a long time to figure all this out. What happened at that point then is my self-esteem was shot. So I built all these walls of being liked. I couldn't not be liked by anybody, even those bullies.
Sorry, Neil. Around how old were you then?
So this is kind of like 9, 10, and this is where I started to create this pseudo personality of being the funny man, being the chatty man, because I never wanted to be in that position again of not being liked. And I also remember somebody was was actually one of my close-knit friends now. He's in Ireland still, but he had a birthday and he was handing around birthday invitations. And when it got to me, he said, "Sorry, mate, I've run out." And I remember being absolutely like devastated. So I was like, I never want to feel like that again. So that sparked this whole false, everything's okay, you know, stuff going on at home, but no, we're fine. Everything's hunky dory, put on a brave face. And that got me through. And then that got me through most of life. I was like, I'm never going to be in this position. So my drive for success was built off those foundations of like, I never want to be in that position again. I never want to not be liked again. And in many ways it was pathetic, like, because I would get in, like, Dublin is a rough place, you know, it can be. And I'd have these assholes like treat me like shit, you know, like everybody does in life. And rather than me going, fuck you, like, I would actually pander to them and try and be their mate. And when I think back of it, like, I'm not say I have a regret about that, but part of me wishes I was like, why didn't you just fucking stand up for yourself, you know? And then when I got into working career, I was always successful, promotions, always did well in jobs, went on to the next job, always, I went like this all the way. Then I got a really massive job in advertising around the same time I started my current business. And that was with an American broadcast company. And I was really out of my depth. That was like your classic, fuck, I've got this huge job and I don't know what I'm doing. I was like, I fucking need it. Like, I mean, I was well experienced in marketing and communications, but advertising on a global level is like, you know, basically, to put it into context, like, we had 40 websites, mastheads, and my job was to know every page inside out in terms of how many users, what the value was, how we could advertise. You know, I was head of product, so my job was to help give the sales team ideas on how to make, you know, it was a huge job. But the reason why I reference that is there was a bullying incident in there. So there was a top director, and it was a matrix system. So there was no GM. All our bosses were back in America. And because I've got strong ethos and values and things like that, I was just doing my job. And one day I said something like, "Oh, I'm not sure we should do that because of X." Like, just being professional. And he saw that as a challenge to his authority. And he pulled me into a room, and I thought he was going to literally punch me. He was like, "You ever make a show of me in front of anyone again, I'll fucking ruin you." This kind of stuff. I was like, what the? I'm just doing my job, you know? And then from that point on, he went for me, you know, he tried to, and it wasn't just to me. He was doing stuff all around. He was eventually fired, you know, like, all that kind of happened. And, you know, the Me Too movement, it all happened at the same time. But what I didn't realize at that, he triggered an unresolved trauma of me being bullied. And I went into this spiral, like, I'm talking spiral. And I was seeing a psychologist at the time, and the panic attacks hadn't come at that point yet. But then I started to, like, if you went into a pitch meeting, a $5 million pitch meeting, and it would be resting on, let's say, an idea that I had, I'd be fucking shitting myself. And then the psychologist started giving me beta blockers, Valium, stuff like that. So I'd take them, you know, when I'd have a big meeting. I'd barely get through it. I'd have to splash my face with water. I'd have to go into the toilet before I go. And this started to happen then more regularly. It went from a pitch meeting to a group meeting to a standard team meeting, you know, and then it started to eventuate into public speaking. And so if I was speaking to an audience of any size, I would get this panic attack would come. And it was like a wave that would build, and the day leading up to it, the hour leading up to it, you know, if I had a coffee before, that would just send me through the roof. So I went through the mud basically with all of this, trying to go, how do I get through this? And that's when I was like, I can't, this is not sustainable. So I don't take any of that stuff, and I haven't now for years. And I just went more inward. I started looking at meditation, breath work, you know, positive thinking, gratitude, you know, and it's not to say those things are still with me. You know, I was in WA last week. I spoke at a conference. I had to do box breathing. So as the conference was going on, I had to sit there silently doing box breathing for myself. I went in, splashing water on my face works for me. So that's the thing about mental health, is there's no silver bullet. I can't tell anyone that's listening to this, go do this and you'll be fine. So that's the bad news. The good news, though, is that there's so many things that we can do to make ourselves better. You know, you could do meditation, it might change your world. Great. You could quit your job. That might be what you need. So there's loads of things you can do. And it's taken me years to build a toolkit, is what I call it. And whenever I need those tools, I pull them out of the bag, I do them, and it gets me through. So I was doing the physiological sigh, and I was doing box breathing. In the
What's box breathing, Neil? Sorry to interrupt.
So box breathing, I'll show you now. Like, and it's one of the most valuable. And this is the thing about wellness. Like, I live in wellness, or I work and breathe wellness, and people go, "What? Like, you must go around the world, and what's the latest trend?" It's like, it's taken me 10 years in the wellness game to realize the most valuable things to me, anyway, are the stuff that's free, you can do anywhere, and is accessible. So I've done Vedic meditation, and I know you had Marshy on. He trained me. And that's why I was inspired by you guys in the show, because that was just an amazing, life-changing experience. But he'll give out to me for saying this, but when you do Vedic, you do 20 minutes twice a day, right? Now, the classic answer is, I don't have time for that. And guess what I'm going to say? I don't have time for that. I've got a sty in my eye. That shows you how fucking tired and stressed I am. But it laid an amazing foundation. You can't see it now. Okay.
No, we can't.
Okay, good.
Who's Sty Neil?
That was stick now. Oh, that was stick.
That's going to trigger another cycle of panic.
Sorry.
Oh my God, I'm going through an unresolved. We're gonna have to cut the podcast short. Look, that's part of my whole thing, is not giving a fuck. When you don't give a fuck anymore, same mental health. When you then it can't have the same control over you. But going back to breath, the box breathing. So this is so simple. So you visualize a box, and you breathe in for 4, you hold for 4, you exhale for 4, and you hold for 4. It's that simple. And I do about 3 rounds of that is usually enough. So it takes you 2 minutes. You can do it on a bus. The Dalai Lama spoke about this. People think meditation needs to be this in a quiet room, legs crossed, yada, yada, yada. And Marshy taught me all that as well. He was like, the whole thing of people trying to keep their back straight and all that, it's all bullshit. You can do it anytime. There's no bad meditation, whether it's 30 seconds or 30 minutes. They're all valuable. So I do that mostly at nighttime, because anxiety hits me a lot at nighttime. So when you go to bed, because when you're busy going around the day, you're working out, you're whatever. When you go to bed at night, it's just you and your thoughts, right? So my head's swirling. I didn't pay that invoice. This guy's chasing me. Da, 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 da. And that's when I do box breathing, or I do it before a big presentation. And then the physiological sigh, I don't know if you know that one, but that's been proven to be the quickest way to reduce your stress levels instantaneously.
What's the physiological sigh?
Okay, I'll do one for you. So
you
breathe in through your nose. So you go, and at the very top, you squeeze another bit in, and then you do a long exhale. So I'll do it without talking. So I don't know if there's any cocaine users out there, but
definitely. All out there.
Yeah.
Out there. Look, you two guys sweating. You're like, what, me? No, this guy. So you got to give a big sniff in, and then do another bit at the top. That's probably the weirdest way to explain the physiological sigh. Anyone from a medical background would know this guy. But that's how easy it is. And the reason why you do the elongated exhale, which a lot of people go, why do you always, like some people say that to me, why do you always have to exhale longer than your inhale? Well, your inhale just generally is about your heart rate increasing. You're bringing oxygen in. Your exhale is lowering your heart rate. So it's getting rid of all that carbon dioxide. So that's why you want to try and press more of it out of the system. And by doing so, you're lowering your heart rate, which is reducing your stress levels and things like that. So that's just like some very basic rules around it. But you can do that anywhere.
Exactly, Neil.
Yeah.
It's
How
free.
long do you do? Sorry, Neil. Sorry for interrupting. But how long? Like, how many box inhales do you do? 3 to 4.
I'll usually do about 3 or 4 rounds, and do you know what happens next? I wake up and I go, oh, like it's worked. As in, I wake up the next morning, so it's worked. You know, I've never gone to bed, done box breathing, and still be awake 2 hours later. It's just,
Really?
yeah, it works for me, you know. And I'm not saying that's the same for everybody, right? Because I know people have serious issues with sleeping, but for me, I could have a million things going around, and I'll do three. If I've done 3 rounds, it's still not working, I'll do a fourth. If that's not still not working, I'll maybe go to 5. I don't think I've ever gone more than 5.
Cool.
So that's the thing.
And,
Like, if you
and
can
then
do
you
the
do you do your Vedic meditation as well, right?
I do, but I tap into that very rarely. Like, that could be, like, at the moment, like, being honest, it might be once a week. Like,
Yeah.
I'm doing one session once a week. So out of, you're supposed to do 14, let's say, I might do one. I could go 2-3 weeks and not do it. But the good thing about Vedic is once you've learned it, you never lose it. It's with you for life. And even as a baseline for all the other breathwork stuff, it I would hugely recommend it because it gave me the control, if I can maybe explain it that way. And I know I can always tap back into it whenever I need it. And when I do, oh gosh, it's like when you go for a massage, right? What's the first thing you say after you finish a massage? Why don't I do this more often? And I get the exact same thing with meditation. And the thing about a lot of wellness things is I talk about this X and Y axis with positive things in your life. So if you do something once, sure, you'll get some benefits. Like, we're in saunas, for example. So if you do a sauna, you'll lose some weight, you'll burn calories, you might feel a bit better, muscles and stuff like that. Same with meditation. If you do it once, you'll feel relaxed in that moment. But the real juice is when you do it consistently over time. And if you do it consistently over time, and just to use saunas as an example, you reduce the risk of cardiovascular disease, stroke by up to 40 to 50%. You reduce things like amnesia, diabetes, dementia, like most disease. The chance of most disease goes way, way down. And that's only by doing it twice a week, you know?
What's that? Most disease.
Yeah, most diseases. Yeah, because what happens when you're in a sauna?
Oh, most
Most. I
diseases.
think.
I was like,
Yeah.
what?
You're like, what's this new disease? Have we not heard about the most
Have I
disease?
got it?
Shit. Better check for that. What's it called again? Most disease.
Yeah, it's a pandemic. It's taken over from COVID. But no, like the thing about saunas is, like, you know, we go to the gym. Some things we're quite well versed in, right? You go to the gym, for example, you flex a muscle, you rip your muscle, and then it binds back together stronger. But what a sauna does, infrared sauna particularly, is that from a cellular level, you're weakening the cells, you're opening the cells up, and then they heal and recover stronger than they did before. So if you're doing that regularly, you're actually training your cells, you're strengthening your cells over time. So that's the real value of it, that if you keep doing that, how often do we get to even do that generally outside of just muscular health? So that's why, and I won't even go into toxins, but nowadays with people who fly a lot, or the perfume that you wear, or the deodorant that you wear, the toothpaste the food that you eat, we consume and come into contact with so many toxins that our bodies just can't deal with that anymore. So in my opinion, like, saunas are just going to be a prerequisite for everyone. Doesn't matter what's going on with you, because they help catapult the detoxification process in your body. And there's no other thing, there's loads of clinical studies on this, no other single use thing that is so accessible has the same impact in terms of getting rid of toxins in your body than a sauna.
Yeah.
Really?
I got to be honest. Like, I had a sauna in my put a sauna in my house in New Zealand, and I lived in it, and I never got sick. You know, like,
Yeah.
you go to the gym, lucky enough to have a little gym in the house as well, and then jump in the sauna after that, and then jump in the pool.
Let's
You know,
go.
like,
Yeah,
in
like a
winter
cold
time.
plunge, right?
Yeah, like a cold plunge. Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's just, yeah, like, I really, really noticed a big change in my health. You know, like, and it was just, yeah, it's bloody wonderful, actually, to be fair.
Yeah, well, there's a great lady called Dr. Susanna Soderberg, who's out of Denmark, and she's a PhD, and she's done a lot of, like, world-renowned studies in contrast therapy, so hot and cold, and she's a specialist in cold therapy particularly as well. And most people know Wim Hof and stuff like that, but yeah, her study says, if you do about 40 to 45 minutes of saunas per week, which can be done as a single session or split up, and then about 10 or 11 minutes of cold immersion therapy,
In
it
conjunction,
reduces.
so
Yeah,
one
you
after
can
the
do
other.
them together or you can do them separately. And like, it doesn't have to be an ice bath either. A lot of people think, well, I don't live near an ice bath or I can't do it. It's too cold. You get the same benefit. The sweet spot with this is 10 to 15 degrees. So
Oh,
10 to 15 degrees you can get from an ocean swim. Even if the ocean is 17 degrees, you're still going to get cold immersion therapy, but just maybe not as strong. So if you're doing like a swim in the ocean 7 days a week, you're already doing it, without you even knowing it.
what does the cold, like, what is it doing? Like, what's the benefit of that?
So when you go into an ice bath, let's say, your body goes into, they call it the dive effect. So your body goes into this fight or flight mode. So you have the sympathetic, which is your stress mode, and then your parasympathetic, which is rest and digest. So we need both of those, right? We need them as humans to survive. But the things have changed drastically over the millennia around, well, we used to need that a lot more to survive animals and wars and things like that. Whereas now we get it from an email. Your
Yeah,
boss sends you a shitty email, you go into this stress kind of response. And what an ice bath does, you go into this stressful environment, and you get that, so your nervous system is going off and you're trying to regulate your nervous system. So I use an accordion to kind of explain it. As like, you go into a stress response by using breath work and regulating your nervous system, you bring yourself back to a parasympathetic state of mind. So if you're doing that over time, again, you're flexing, you're contracting, you're flexing, contracting, you're increasing your neuroplasticity in terms of the response to stressful environments. So the next time you do get an email from your boss, it's not to say you're not going to get that, fuck, but you're going to recover a lot quicker. Your nervous system's going to go, yeah, we see you, but this is not a life-threatening thing. Come back to normality. And that's what I think is the best thing from a cold therapy, and particularly for someone who struggles with mental health. That's another quick way to really regulate your nervous system. If I do it sometimes if I've got a presentation and I have sometimes you got to work with your environment, right? If I'm in Singapore in a hotel, I'm not going to have an ice bath, but if I'm in my home, I do have an ice bath. So if I've got a meeting that day, I'll always do an ice bath that morning because it will just shock my system. I'll regulate my nervous system. So when I do feel a little bit more edgy later, it already has a bit of a response to it. And what happens in an ice bath is, because you're in this dive effect, the same thing happens if you dive underwater. So you're in survival mode. So you need to lower your heart rate. You're trying to calm it down. And then when you lower your heart rate, what happens is we start producing brown fats because you're trying to stay warm. And brown fats are the good fats, and they're linked to increasing your metabolism. So your metabolism then goes on fire to survive. So when I do an ice bath in the morning, I get this natural high. I feel supercharged for the day. And then anything you eat or do anything on that day has this amazing grounding of like your metabolism is on fire. So whatever you eat and do, you're just like, you're at it. And yeah, that's why combining them together, increases longevity, overall health. Places like America, they're saying it's life changing for a lot of people because of obesity and things like that over there. It's difficult to get someone to exercise. Whereas with a sauna, you just literally have to sit there, So yeah, I think, big blue sky, but I think, somewhere in the future, and like there's already countries doing this. Like if you go to Finland, they don't
Yeah,
have they don't have sauna studios. Like my business Nimbus would not survive in Finland because why? Because they have them all in their houses.
exactly.
yeah.
It's like having a washing machine.
It's a
You
cultural
have to have
thing,
it.
though, isn't it? They've always done
Yeah,
it.
yeah, exactly right. But with that cold therapy too, you can just when you wake up in the morning and everyone likes a hot shower, right? We all like a hot shower in the morning, or most people do anyway. I do, and then you're like, okay, and you whip it round to freezing cold, right?
Yeah.
And you're like, oh,
You're
but
like,
you can only standing there for 10 seconds.
Yeah,
But
but that's the
you can
same
actually,
thing,
it's the
right?
same thing. Like
Similar.
you can get into the shower and you
yeah,
can turn it on to cold in winter when you get up in the morning. And if you've
yeah,
got, if you've got the willpower, you don't need to spend heaps of money on stuff.
That's the thing. It's actually
It can actually,
quite accessible, isn't it? All of these things.
Exactly. That's what I'm going to contradict my whole business model and go, you don't need to buy a sauna. But, you know, if you can have those things, great. If you live near one of our studios, come in, great. But if you don't,
but you do. It's hard to get the hot. It's hard to get it hot. You need like. But what I'm saying is, it's easier to get the cold, I guess. You know.
Exactly. Yeah. But even with saunas, right? Like we have private saunas and things like that. But like you can go down to Icebergs, which is down the road from this. Like, you know, this is me actively promoting somebody else. But you can go down to Icebergs for like, I think it's like $5 or $10, you know, to do it. And even with Nimbus, we're aware of this as well. So we have a couple of community partners. So we work with Addison Road. We also work with Batir, the mental health charity I mentioned. And we, One Another is another group. We work with a few community partners who we actually give them free memberships. So, and I don't even care, like we don't care about collecting data. We just say, we'll give you 3 saunas a week. You give them out to whoever you think needs them. So Addison Road does all this amazing work with single mums or single dads or immigrants or survivors of DV and things like that. Now imagine if you're like a woman or a man, you know, and you survive with DV, and like they have supermarkets down there where you don't pay anything for it. You get like credits and people come in and use it. And when I saw that, I was like, oh my God, that's what people have to do just to get their food every week, you know? But also awesome that they provide that service. And, you know, but a lot of it is about trying to give people just one small thing to help them get back on their feet again. And imagine what a sauna could do. And not to sound really wanky, but like if someone who has had no self-care whatsoever for maybe years and has been abused can go in a room and feel special for 45 minutes, that could be the one thing that kind of that just, you know, helps them. And like I talk a lot about micro moves make macro changes. So, and it's not just saunas, you can do this with anything. Going to a book club or taking a chance on something. Like I was in a nudie shoot 2 or 3 weeks ago in Brisbane with a New York artist called Spencer Tunick, and he's done Opera House and he's done Bondi Beach. He goes all around the world. And I signed up to that about 6 months ago, and it was easier to sign up online. And then about a month ago, I got a note saying, "Oh, I hope you're ready next week." I was like, "Oh shit!" And I was on my own, but I did it, and it was honestly one of the most amazing things I've ever done. And so, like putting yourself out there, just doing one little thing, you just don't know what might come of it. So. And you guys are right. Like trust me guys, like I've spent years trying to figure out what is the next thing or what is something that you need to have in your lifestyle. And yes, some things you do have to pay money for, but a lot of the good stuff is free. And that cold shower. So Wim Hof does a 30-day cold shower, and you don't even have to do this all year round, mind you, right? So do it in the middle of summer if that's what you want to, you know, to, let's say the easy way to do this. And I usually say cold showers are a gateway into ice baths. So if I hear people going, I can't do ice baths, it's too cold. Do this 30-day challenge where you have your hot shower, you wash your bits and tits and all that. And when you're finished, you do 30 seconds of cold. Yeah. Just 30 seconds, right? And you don't even have to jump in full body. You can do your arms first, your legs. Usually it's your chest and your backside. That is the bit that gets you, but do them at the end, and then do that for a week. Week 2, do 45 seconds at the end. Week 3, do a minute. And week 4, trust me, anyone who will do this and actually do it the way I've just said it, by week 4, you usually are able to do the entire shower cold. And you do that for 30 days. That will stick around for 12 months. Like if you do that for just 30 days, I guarantee it, you will not be picking up common colds as much as you used to. You don't feel the cold as much, and it literally lasts until the summer comes back around again. If you want to do it regularly, great, but I do it every summer as a kind of a launch into summer. On the first month of summer, I do this, and it's unbelievable, like what it gives me throughout the whole year. And when winter comes, you do not feel the winter as much as you would if you didn't do it.
It's about bedtime over here. What's the time? It's been so good. It's been really, really, I wouldn't say mind altering, but it's certainly like, opened up some neural pathways. Put it that
God,
way.
yeah, I can't wait to get to this box breathing.
Yeah, I'm
personally.
going to go and jack in a few breaths.
Yeah.
I'm going to do that now, Neil. with a cup of tea as well, mate. The real basic things in life, innit?
Send me before and after. Send me before and after shots of you guys. Well, thanks guys.
Thank you so much. Yeah.
Yeah, cheers. See you.
Bye,
Have a
mate.
good night. Bye.